Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Pre-Order Bonus. I am one of your hosts, Cameron Warren, and I'm joined by Jacob Price. And it's Tuesday night, and it's time to talk about video games. Jake?
Yes, it is. It's only Tuesday, and I feel like the past few days have been crazy hectic, and I have been finding solace in the after kid bedtime video game sessions.
Yeah, I think I made a mistake last weekend because I watched the Snyder Cut in its entirety in one sitting.
Oh,
Well, no, so that's a lie. So I started it on Friday night and I watched like 30 minutes, and then I did all like the rest of the 3.5 hours on Saturday night.
right.
And you know what? I didn't hate it. It's actually not bad, except for the last the last 10% of the movie is a dumpster fire, but the first 90%, it's not bad.
Dang, that's not great though. Poor ending.
I'll actually say that it's so the ending where they should have rolled credits is actually it's great. It's fine. But then they do stuff after the fact. If you actually watch it, you'll see what I mean. But I actually think it's worth watching. I actually do, and I think the reason is we're so used to the Marvel formula, and Marvel does a great job.
Mhm.
I mean, they do a fantastic job. Like, they figured it out. They kind of know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Obviously, I also watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the first episode, which I saw, Jake, on Twitter that you were a little skeptical about that, but it's actually quite good. It's actually quite good. I recommend. It's got some interesting themes in the first episode around like PTSD and veterans and how they're supported like after war, and like kind of interesting themes in there. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I'll have to give it a watch. Just from the trailers, it looked like I don't know. It looked okay, but it didn't really grab my attention. WandaVision grabbed my attention because it was just such a weird angle. All the promos were the sitcom episodes. So I was like, what the heck is this, right? But I'll give it a watch on your recommendation. It's just one episode that's been out, right?
There's just one out, and I think you'll actually enjoy it. I think you'll be surprised. I think on the surface, it kind of looks like generic run-of-the-mill, like buddy action cop, action soldier type thing.
Yeah, kind of does.
But first episode at least is promising, so we'll see. I thought it was good. But Snyder Cut, man, it was actually good enough where it made me go, man, I wish there was like more continuity to this. As messy as this thing is. I mean, Jake, if I can just mention, Warner Brothers spent $200 million on this movie after all has been said and done.
On the Snyder Cut?
So they initially spent like $100 million or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And then they spent an additional like $50 million to fix it with Joss Whedon, who was the original director of the Avengers, the first Avengers movie.
Right.
And then when they decided, we're going to let Zack Snyder just do his crazy Snyder Cut, and because he didn't have to release it in theaters because streaming has kind of changed the game, they gave him $70 million to do his version.
That's a pretty penny.
So it's just kind of insane. And I think the most interesting part about it, and the reason I'm mentioning it, because I think our viewers will be interested in this idea, right? It's that it's the first time, I think, out there that an artist on a like massive, 75, 100 million plus viewer stage, which is HBO Max like subscribership, was just given free reign, 100% creative freedom. Just do everything that you want to do and just put it up for the world to see, which I think this is the first time that we've ever seen that. And it's actually a fascinating concept. And I think depending on how successful this project is for HBO Max, I think we're going to see other artists get this chance.
Super interesting. I mean, this is something that's much more common in the video game industry, right? That you can do patch notes, you can do updates. Look at all these games that have come back from the grave, right? Destiny, No Man's Diablo 3, those types of um those types of games, right? Hey, it's my 3-year-old. He's naked and should be in bed. Um, yeah, so those things have been able to come back from the grave. I remember seeing a kind of an article from Kotaku that was a bit of a joke, and it was about movie Cats and how a bunch of the actors they were missing the CGI hands or arms or something, and so they went in and they put a brand new version in theaters, and that was like the first like patch note to a movie. And so it's kind of interesting. This is something along those lines where it's like you can actually see different versions of the movies over time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Do we need to pause, Jake?
Maybe. Good night, bud. Love you. Well, he went upstairs by himself.
I can post edit. No worries.
Okay, just cut to a scene of cats.
I'll throw a clip of cats in here and that. No, I mean, why we're talking about cats on this podcast now? We've gone way off the rails. But anyway, point is, check out Snyder Cut. If you're on the fence, I'd say check it out. It's just an interesting case. But Jake, let's talk about video games again for a second, because I am in an absolute gaming rut. This happens every once in a while, but this one's pretty bad. I got to be honest. It's pretty bad.
Viewers, we need listeners. Please write in. Give us a comment. What game should Cameron be playing right now?
I need your recommendations really bad. Hit us up on the Discord. DM us on Twitter. DM me on Twitter. What should I be playing right now? So let me just give you a quick snapshot reviews of a couple games I played on Game Pass. So Prey, which was just added from the Bethesda acquisition, didn't quite hit it for me, but it's an interesting concept. Okay, I'll just tell you that much. It has very much like a BioShock vibe, like really hard BioShock vibes.
Yeah. Okay.
I also tried Wolfenstein Old Blood. So Wolfenstein New Order, this is the expansion for that.
Okay.
And Wolfenstein New Order is actually a fantastic game. It's got this crazy, like wild, alternate like World War II history, but they just go absolutely crazy sci-fi weirdness with it, with the whole thing. And it's actually good. But so the Lost Blood's like this expansion in the same world. That bored me instantly because it has this really terrible mechanic in the first like 10 minutes. So I can't get through this.
Nice.
And then I'll throw this one out there. I don't think this is a Game Pass one, but Splinter Cell Blacklist. Have you played any Splinter Cell games at all, Jake?
What was the first Splinter Cell? Do you remember?
It's called Splinter Cell.
Yeah, I mean, do you know when it was? It's like PS2?
Xbox, original Xbox era.
Xbox? Okay, yeah. I haven't played it.
So Blacklist is the final game in the series. They haven't come out with a new Splinter Cell game, which is a crying shame. But this is the final game that came out in the series. Does not feature whoever the voice actor is. It's not Kiefer Sutherland. That's Solid Snake. But whoever the voice actor is who typically plays Sam Fisher at the games, he's not in this one, but this game is actually really good. It's on 360. It's backwards compat on the Series X.
Okay.
But it's a 360 game, but it's crazy is it actually looks phenomenal. Like it looks really good. The graphics are actually really good.
Okay, there's no FPS boost for
There's
that
no
type.
FPS boost. There's nothing. It's just if you've never played a Splinter Cell game, it's kind of a unique title on its own. It's a third-person stealth action game, and it has this mechanic. It's very much like Tom Clancy counterterrorism, like go after the terrorists because you're unraveling their plot. But anyway, I've been bouncing all over the place, Jake. Lots of games. Still haven't found anything that really is vibing, and I'm on the edge about to go and try Bloodborne again to see if I can convince myself to become a Dark Souls a Soulsian, a Soulsite, but I don't know if it's going to happen.
All right. Well, I say give it a try, but then again, I've never played Bloodborne. From what I understand, that was the first From Software game that sort of picked up the pace. And this is something I think most of our listeners know, but I'm playing through Dark Souls 1 Remastered right now. and that game is much slower in a lot of ways than Dark Souls 3. And Bloodborne was From Software's, okay, let's pick up the pace a little bit. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I don't know. I've seen streams of it. I honestly can't get into that aesthetic, that sort of like gothic vaudeville steampunk.
Right.
Really not my jam.
Totally, yeah.
So for me, like I'd much rather stick with the Dark Souls high fantasy. Everything's sad and dark and
I mean,
undead.
Dark Souls still has a little bit of goth, like dark vibes for sure, right?
Yeah, for sure, but it's definitely not so much like vaudeville. Like I'm one of the
Yeah,
main.
this is like straight up like 18th century like creepiness. Like what's the word? It's oh my
Uh,
gosh, I'll look it up real quick while you're talking. Sorry.
okay, yeah. So I don't know. That's one of those games I see a ton about. If there's a dedicated fan base, right, to about Earthbound, about getting Earthbound on Switch, about Mother 3 finally getting a release in the West, and I think there's a just as dedicated and vocal community of Bloodborne fans who are asking for Bloodborne to be released on PC and in 60 FPS. Like I see that everywhere.
It's a huge demand. It's because there's a rumor from a prominent I can't remember his Twitter handle, but there's a rumor that's out there from a prominent guy who's been right in the past who said Bloodborne PC remake is coming, 60 FPS, like trust me, it's coming, and he said it a couple times. So that makes me kind of want to wait, but I'm so bored right now that I have to find like something that I can just go sink my teeth into.
Yeah.
I was texting you the other day, Jake. I haven't sunk my teeth into anything like really hard since probably Ghost of Tsushima.
Mhm.
Um, but anyway, what I was gonna say, it's Lovecraftian horror.
There you go.
That's
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. And that typically isn't my jam. So for me, I'm happy like watching streams of Bloodborne for sure, but playing it, I don't know. Um, but Cameron, what I've been playing, I've gotten into this really good rhythm right now where I've been playing Littlewood on Switch, which I'm about wrapped up with. I'm really surprised with how much I've really been loving that game. I think it's really well crafted. And then I've been bouncing between Undertale, Dark Souls 1, and then Middle Earth Shadows of War. Um,
Yeah.
Finally, this is one of the 3 games or so that Cameron is always bugging me to play. I think it's this one, Wolfenstein, and Batman, right? And finally, I'm cracking into one of them. And I've been super surprised with how much I'm enjoying it. I think they got a really, really good thing going. It's like an Assassin's Creed, but they ditched the open world. Like if you're taking the first 3, or excuse me, the most Assassin Creeds, they ditched the open world and they hyper focus on this bounty hunter system. Um, and it's fantastic. Like I've really been enjoying it. Um, and I need to resituate myself into where this fits hypothetically in the Lord of the Rings timeline. But there's things that I think are just kind of fine or a little bland. But in terms of like gameplay and gameplay loop, it's a great one. I think they did a good job.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm really glad you're playing that. So episode coming soon for sure on Shadow of War, by the way.
Yep.
That's one of my all time favorites, and I think it's I mean I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, so just anything in the setting. I know it doesn't follow like the rules of the Silmarillion or whatever. So it doesn't apologize to Lord of the Rings nerds, but the
No.
fact that it's like a big AAA game in the setting, it's a really good one. I actually cracked it open today on PC because it plays at
Oh,
60 frames. I
nice.
might play through that one again. And the best part about that one, Jake, is as you play, it gets way better. So as you unlock abilities, when you get to like your maximum abilities, it's almost a completely different game. It just changes like everything. A lot of the like the when you're assaulting the fortresses, all that stuff like escalates and gets harder and harder. But then you have abilities to tackle it with. So it's cool. There's a lot there.
Yeah, I think something that surprised me was how much you have to actually think about combat and
Yeah.
how you have to think about approaching different scenarios. Because when I first started playing, I was like, this feels like a hack and slash. I just run around chopping orcs in half. But as I realized, oh, I'm running into bigger and bigger numbers, different types of orcs that I can't just run up and sword at. Um, it's been it's been good. I think it's one of those action games that has enough like more strategy required than normal
Yep.
that it makes it interesting. And then you have that rival system. Okay, I'm gonna stop you. We're gonna do an episode on this game. So, but just
That's fine.
I've just been surprised, and it's a pleasant surprise, and I really like that. So I think right now where I'm gaming, I'm in a good place. Littlewood surprised me in really great ways. Shadows of War surprising me right now. Um, I can get the satisfaction of beating my head against the wall in Dark Souls 1. We're good.
Well, I'm gonna figure something out. Something's got to give here pretty quick because I'm getting pretty bored. I'm running out of movies, running out of TV shows, running out of games. I mean, soon I'm gonna have to read books, and I don't know if I can handle that.
I read from a book every day.
I can't do it. I'll just fall asleep. Enough about that, Jake. This episode of the pre-order bonus, we are talking about a game, another Game Pass game. Shocker! It's Desperados 3. This is available on Game Pass for PC and Xbox. It's on Series X. It's a great one. Jake, tell everybody how we're going to talk about Desperados 3 today.
Sure thing. As always, we are going to break down our analysis into 4 different categories. The first one being narrative. Here, there's a lot to say about the story. Whether or not that all pays out is something else. And we're going to discuss that, who the story is about, who the villains are. I mean, this is a Western through and through. And so, yeah, we'll be talking about Westerns for sure here. And then the next category is mechanics, the nitty gritty of the game, how you're going to play it, how you're going to interact it, what the different goals and objectives are in the game, and essentially how it happens. It's a strategy game, and this game relies a lot on stealth. And I've been surprised because typically I shy away from stealth games. And I know, Cameron, you love these types of games. And so it's been fun to find a game that we both enjoy in this genre. And so I'm really excited to talk about the mechanics and why I think they're different here. And then you can tell us more about, the mechanics and how you go about devising different strategies and different abilities you have as you're playing. Third category is gameplay loop. What's going to bring you back to this game? Why would you fall off from this game? There's a lot to say here, I think, in terms of this game, and also in terms of maybe accessibility as well. This is one of those games that's pretty challenging. So how do you make it accessible to a lot of different people? And then finally, we'll be talking about impact on the industry. So where does this game fit in a broader spectrum of games like this? Desperados 3, I remember I was reading a little bit about its history and the developer's history, and they made some pretty significant very purposeful changes when approaching this game compared to their prior one, which I think was Shogun Battle Tactics. And so there's a lot of interesting discussion to have here about this genre of game. How niche is it? How accessible is it to a wide variety of people? And we'll get into that in our 4th category.
So, narrative of Desperados 3. It's not very memorable, I'll tell you that much. But I think it's not really because it's like a bad narrative. It's just not like the central focal point of the game. I think it definitely needs to be there. It's it's a Wild West story. It involves it gave me like Red Dead Redemption 2 vibes because they're talking about the DeWitt Company, and I kept thinking Vanderland like when they were saying that. I was like, oh, okay. Same. They've got some like crooked Western businessman who's got a company. He's got a bunch of cronies that are doing bad stuff, and you're going to go around and kill the dudes. That's basically all you need to know. There's stuff that happens with individual characters, but it's not anything deep. There's not like thematic elements that you need to discuss here. But I think that the reason it's that way is partly because the game requires so much thinking. It requires like a lot of thought. Again, it's a strategy game.
Yeah.
That like when you go through a level, it takes a while. And by the time you kind of get through and actually like solve the different set pieces in the level, you kind of forget like why you're even there. You're just like kind of trying to solve the puzzle. And so that tended to happen to me a lot. But I did appreciate for sure like the Wild West setting. I think they absolutely nail it in terms of the art design, the characters, the voice acting is really, really good. I thought all of the voice acting was really well done. And the narrative, like, it's interesting enough where I'm like, oh yeah, I want to keep going. I want to understand like what's the deal with what's the name of the main character, Jake, the main cowboy dude.
James Cooper.
That's right. So understanding like, hey, what's the deal with this guy? Because they don't explain quite everything, and everyone kind of has little backstories. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I would say for me, if you're a big fan of like spaghetti westerns, you're a fan of revenge stories, this is it, and it hits all the notes there. Yeah, James Cooper, he's trying to kill this dude named Frank. I have a list of characters here because I couldn't remember all their
yeah,
names
there's a
either.
lot.
There are a lot of different characters. Yeah, I don't even think Frank has a last name. All you know is that James wants to kill him because Frank did his dad dirty. I think he killed his, and you get involved in like the DeWitt scandals. You meet different characters, and they're all kind of shady. I would say we talked about this in a Red Dead Redemption 2 episode. I was surprised at how well Rockstar was able to handle, a 21st century mindset around diversity and set it in 1899. Here, I think they kind of missed the mark. I mean, you have a guy who's Latino, looking up his name, Hector Mendoza, and you have a woman, Kate O'Hara, but they just kind of fit all the Western tropes about like Latinos or women in the Wild West. I mean, you can watch the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you get the exact same characters here. So I think there was some sort of intention to narratively kind of make things interesting with a diverse cast, but everybody is just kind of listen. This is a revenge spaghetti western, and if you're into that, that's what you're gonna get. But yeah, for me, I thought this is kind of a dumb criticism considering what type of game it is. It's a strategy game where you have a lot of different people with different abilities, and that what that translates to in this game is that you have a lot of different characters with different abilities. And I didn't feel like all the stories were very evenly told, but at the same time, it's very easy to forgive that because, like you said, Cameron, it's easy to forget people's names. You watch cutscenes and you're like, "Oh, that was a cool Western cutscene," but you're really more interested in the mechanics and much less interested in the story. So it's kind of hard to be like, "Well, the story sucked or it wasn't good enough." The story was fine. I mean, it did its job. It was a vehicle for moving things forward, so you weren't, playing the exact same map in the exact same way uh, every level you were on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's really more about the atmosphere and the setting because it's
Yeah.
the last game. It's almost exactly the same as this game in terms of the mechanics and how it's executed and the design, but it's based in ancient Japan. So you have a completely different setting, completely different set of characters with different abilities. Here it's Wild West, so it's a brand new like toolbox of stuff. And I think
Yeah.
this is taking us into the mechanics conversation because this is where this game, absolutely shines. Is this is a really mechanically deep tactical stealth action game, and it's very unique. Like I think THQ Nordic, they are also the creators of the Commando series, which is very famed, like tactical stealth game. I believe there's actually a new Commandos coming out fairly soon. I can't remember, but Desperados and then Shogun was their newer one in the series, which came out a few years ago. Desperados 3 is obviously the continuation of the Desperado series, but they're all these tactical stealth action games, and they're very unique. Like this is kind of their own genre. Like that, nobody else is really making games like this. So it's a combination of a lot of different things, but mostly it's a puzzle game. It's a puzzle game disguised as a like strategy game, because essentially what it comes down to is all the interactions that you're doing. I'll give you an example of a set piece, right? Like that I just did. You have an objective where you have to go kill a guard, but that guard is like one of the red coat guards. Okay, so you can't kill them with
Yeah.
with just what you can't kill them with John Cooper. You have to kill them with Hector Mendoza because he has the axe and he's this big burly dude. And so around him will be 5 or 6 of his cronies and then various like ways that you can take them down. And so in this situation I had Doc McCoy, who's another character. He's a sniper. He has like an ability where he can throw a poison bomb at someone and make them all like, you know, basically stuns them for a second. And then Hector has the ability where he can go grab like a torch and he can throw it in like oil. So there's like little oil spots on the ground.
Yeah.
And so it's all about like you're taking out people without being seen. And then one of the coolest things that they include that kind of makes the game like really fun is if you hit shift. I'm on PC, so if you hit shift, I don't know what is in Xbox, but it allows you to freeze time and set up subsequent actions. So an example of that would be Doc McCoy, you hit shift, you click on a guy standing on a tower to snipe him while you have Hector like in a bush. You click on a guy and he's going to go up and like get him from behind. And so that way you can kind of quickly take 2 guys down and it has all this like tactical depth to it. So
yeah,
really cool. There's just so much here and this is such a unique game. It's interesting to talk about.
Yeah, and the mechanics here, there's a lot of moving parts. And this is what originally turned me off from Battle Tactics or Shogun Battle Tactics was the tutorial did not do a great job of teaching you all of these moving parts. There's a lot going on, different types of enemies that you take out. Like Cameron mentioned, some people have the ability to take out different types of enemies more easily than others. And a lot of that is just super overwhelming. But what I was super appreciative of here in Desperados 3 is that there's a long tutorial. And there's a lot of hand holding. And so for somebody like me who's not super well versed in the genre or how this, studio operates, that was incredibly welcome. And it was very easy for me to get in. Cameron, you may have been a little more frustrated with it. I don't know. But I will say, like, because there's so many different moving parts, you have each character and they have 3 or 4 different abilities and they move at different speeds. And some people can dispose of specific enemies more easily than others. Some people can climb up vines. Some people can't. There's so many different restrictions of how you're acting with the environment and how you're trying to take down enemies that I really needed that. And so in terms of mechanics, there's a whole lot going on. I've kind of just listed off a bunch here, but they work really well because they're very fine tuned to fit like a puzzle, right? And so for a second, I got caught up in like, well, if I do this, it'll be too loud and it'll probably distract these people. But thankfully, the UI is really great and you can map all of these things out.
Yeah.
And you can say, okay, if I use this ability, like flick a coin and it's going to make people face a specific direction, who's that going to hit? And how is a door or, something going to impede how that person is interacting with that ability? So all of the information is there. And it really is not too difficult to be able to filter and understand and make decisions based off of all of these different moving parts. So I was actually really impressed with that. I think mechanically, a lot going on. And on top of all that, there's no one right solution to any puzzle piece. That the mechanics are, very restricted, limited in how they operate, but the maps are designed in such a way that there's more than one solution to a problem.
Yeah, and I think you've hit on what makes this game work and what makes it really fun is when you're in the map and you're in these different set pieces and there's a number of different ways that you can handle the situation. In fact, the game is explicit about telling you that because when you finish a mission, you'll see all the extra like achievements that you didn't do. And I rarely did any of them. I typically did like probably the worst way possible to like complete the mission, but you'll get these things in the end and it induces like a ton of replayability because you'll get all the achievements. You're like, oh man, like I was supposed to kill those 3 guys like without making any noise. I need to go back and like play it again. So there's a ton of replayability similar to like Hitman in that way, where that Hitman's even more extensive on that part. But it's just really interesting. And I think what this nails, the fun in this, is that when you get into situations where you're like, how in the heck am I going to do this? There's like 15 guys on the screen, and there's this boss dude that like this guy's facing this way and this guy's facing this way, and I can't like maneuver. How am I actually going to do this? So the joy in the game is figuring out that you actually can do it, and figuring out like cool, like interesting ways to solve the puzzle, which is typically like killing guys or getting past some guys. And that's really fun. I think that's what the game nails, and that's what makes it work.
Yeah.
Is it's just like, typically I'm not a huge puzzle game fan, but because this has that layer of, oh, it's a strategy, it's a tactical strategy game in the Wild West. No, I mean, it's actually really like a puzzle game at its core. But because it's wrapped in this like nice shell, I think it made me get into it and appreciate, the cool mechanics that it employs. It's fun to get in those situations and try and work your way out of them.
Yeah, and I think you're right, man. I mean, the game really works really well in how you can approach things. And I think what's also really nice, the game is really not punishing in that quick save is your best friend.
Yeah,
And
in fact, it has a timer. It straight up will tell you,
yeah,
hey, it's been a long time since you've saved, because it wants you to, it knows you, it's like, what's the word? It's encouraging you to just make mistakes, just try stuff out,
yeah.
because you could just instantly reload.
Yeah, I think that timer starts after a minute. It's like, hey, it's been a minute since you've saved, which feels like an incredibly long time because you're just sitting there thinking. Um, but I kind of loved it, right? So I would do a quick save. My party's hiding in some bushes. We've got 7 people we need to take out, and I'm thinking specifically in one of the levels, there's a wedding happening, and you have to steal somebody's clothes for a disguise. And I
Right.
was like, but in order to get here, I'm bottlenecked because I can't go around. I have to go like through this gate, but there are 5 guys outside the gate, and then you've got 5 guys inside the gate. How am I going to do this? And having that quick save, like, all right, we're going to start from this bush, and I'm going to look. It looks like I have a window to take this guy out, and his body in the bushes. So I give it a try, but as soon as I'm dragging him to the bushes, oh wait, a guy I didn't notice spotted me. Raise the alarm. Cool, reload. Right. And this is something we talked about in our Game Makers episode with Mario, that when something's really challenging, it feels really nice to not have wasted 15 minutes to go back and redo it. But if you've spent 30 seconds trying a new strategy in Desperados 3, and it's only 30 seconds spent, and that feels good. It feels like I'm not being super punished for making a tiny mistake. Or for example, this happened to me a lot. I'm dragging a body to hide it, and there's plenty of time, but for whatever reason, I get stuck on a rock or some part of the environment, and so I'm maneuvering around it and I get caught. And so instead of being punished for that small mistake and having to redo a whole level or whatever it is, it's like, great, let's reload. Okay, took me back 20 seconds. Let's go again.
I think that brings us to the gameplay loop, Jay, because I think that's kind of exactly what we're talking about, is this idea of, because this isn't turn based, right? This is real time, but you can pause, you can freeze time, and you can queue up different actions if you want. I mean, you can kind of quickly get on the fly. Like John Cooper, for example, has 2 guns, so you can like tap the button really quick, point the cursor over, and like shoot guys, like full real time action mode.
Yeah.
You got to be like pretty good to do that, or else you're gonna get killed. But you're gonna trigger an alarm and have like 50 guys on you. But I think that's the loop that's fun, right? You figure out how to solve a problem, you solve it, or you fail, you reload, you try a different way, you fail, you reload, you try a different way, and then you get it, and then you save it, and it's just like, it's satisfying to just kind of do that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you have all these levels where there's probably 10, 15 different ways to solve any given situation, and then the achievements stacked on top of that, where it's like, oh, actually, like if you do, if you go through the whole level without killing anyone, like you're gonna get extra points to get an achievement. And so it just adds all this stuff. And so I think it's got a really strong loop. Like there's a lot to do here, but it doesn't feel like, because like you said, it does a really good job of kind of introducing you to the mechanics over time. It doesn't feel like you're just being thrown into the deep end. Where a lot of strategy games, most strategy games, in fact, you kind of feel like you're just getting thrown into the deep end, and you gotta go to YouTube, or you gotta go to a guide, and you gotta look up like, how do I freaking play this game? I don't understand. It's what
Yeah.
I've had to do with XCOM. Like, I just get absolutely destroyed, and I have to go and like watch videos, or with any real time strategy game or any of these big grand strategy games that I've played. You have to go on and do like literal research, like you're in a college class, to understand like how to play the
Yeah.
game. Where it's one of the few games where I felt like there's a ton of depth because it's a strategy, it's a tactical game, but it introduces to you it in a really like smooth curve, taking up the difficulty in kind of a nice, succinct way. And I thought it executed that well.
Yeah. I mean, the very first level, the tutorial level, you're crossing, you're walking across the roof of a stopped train, and that level by design is very linear because you're following the train, right? And so you're spending less time thinking about your environmental surroundings and more about how you're going to use your abilities. When you get to the front of the train, eventually the map opens up a little bit, and you kind of take like this small circle around the train engine, accomplishing different goals. And that is something that I really loved, because at first it's heavy focus on abilities. You're going to use your abilities, how you're going to sneak. And then environment is a huge part of this game, how you're going to manipulate it, how you're going to use it to hide, what obstacles are to break line of sight between you and an enemy. And so in that final area, it slowly introduces, okay, you're going to have to pay a little more attention to your surroundings. And then in the subsequent levels, you get introduced to new characters, you get introduced to new abilities. And then when it all kind of comes together, it feels really good. It feels like, okay, I understand each of the tools in the toolbox and I can use them. And so for me, I think getting through the first chapter, there are 3 chapters in the game. Getting through the first chapter of the game is relatively easy, and it's relatively fun. The gameplay loop was designed in such a way that you learn bit by bit, you're slowly expanding, and you feel really accomplished getting a handle of how the game operates. And so, in terms of what's pushing you along through the game, if you're into like a revenge story, if you're into a spaghetti western, sure, it'll be the narrative. But if you're just into like how this game is designed, like satisfactory, satisfying stealth, satisfying takedowns, satisfying, ways to accomplish a mission. Maybe you got through an area that was really difficult for you, but you managed to get through. Like those small wins that accumulate over the course of a level, that's what's going to keep you coming back to the game. That's what got me coming back every time I wanted to play. It was never a burden to try to get through a level. It was hard because I had to think about it, but it was always fun.
Yeah, I think if I had to say, anything negative about the game, it just is, for me, I think I think I needed like it's so hard with a game like this to do this, and so it's probably an unrealistic ask, but I needed the pacing to be like a little bit better, because I needed, like I was saying, like you jump in a level and there is like a story wrapped around it, but you just
Yeah.
forget why you're there, because the level just kind of, it opens you up and you just do a whole bunch of stuff, but it doesn't, like nothing really happens like in the level to kind of tell you, to kind of move the story forward. And so it kind of slows things down to like a creeping pace. And so by the time I beat the level, I don't have that feeling of like, oh man, I really need to go play the next one because I want to know what happens in the story. Now you may have that feeling if you're like, I'm really going to play the next one because I love these, these tactical puzzle mechanics that are fun to play.
Yeah.
It didn't hit super duper hard for me in that way. It was fun enough where every once, every other night or so, I would jump on and I'd do a level and then I would just call it good.
Hmm.
I think I wanted a little bit more from it in that respect, but otherwise, I think what it sets out to do, it does better than anyone else. I don't think there's anyone doing, real time tactical strategy like this anywhere, and so they're the best and they're doing it well.
Yeah. I would say my biggest critique of this type of game isn't so much about the game as it is about people like me who are playing this genre very casually. This is not a very casual game. You
No,
don't play
no.
this game to have a relaxing night and do something mindless because you're forced to think. Even and I was playing on normal, right? And I messed up plenty of times. I can only imagine how difficult this game is on the harder difficulties. It would be
Absolutely.
excruciating. I think some of these would be. So you're gonna fall off of this game if you just don't want to do this kind of thinking in a video game. Something that bothered me on console was, and actually, I think the controllers like controls were really good. Um, except for the cameras, I had to think too much because I think you have to hold down right bumper to shift if you're like pivoting the camera, or if you're moving the entire camera. It's a very simple control, and I forgot it all of the time. Um, so playing on controller doesn't feel necessarily great. This is clearly a game that was designed PC first, console second,
Hmm.
which isn't a bad thing. Studios have their priorities, and I think this type of genre does especially well with a whole keyboard worth of buttons instead of using like weapon wheels and stuff like that. But yeah, I think for me, I definitely slowed down in the game as soon as I was like, man, I don't want to think this hard for an entire level tonight. I'd rather do something else. So
Yeah.
if you want something that's going to make you scratch your head, absolutely, you're going to keep going in this game. Levels get more difficult. You're going to be in different scenarios. I mean, it's very replayable in the sense that each map has a very different environmental layout, and you're going to have a whole different set of abilities depending on who the characters are to navigate that map. So there's replayability there for sure. But if this is not the type of genre that just gets you really excited, I think it's the best introduction to the genre, but you're going to taper off. And that's kind of leading into my thoughts on our final category as well.
Yeah, let's go right into it, Jake. I think how does a game like Desperados 3 fit into the industry conversation? Like where does it sit? I mean, it's clearly not a crazy popular game. Like it didn't get a lot of new. It did get critical acclaim. It got great reviews from all the major outlets. Everybody who I heard talked about it just absolutely loved it and thought it was fantastic. But it is very much like you said. It's like a niche. It's sort of a niche genre. I would wonder. I'd be curious, like how well this does from a sales standpoint. It probably does. It obviously does well enough because they keep making them. So, um, but in terms of like the industry conversation, like, I mean, I don't think we're going to see any. This isn't like the start of some boon of like stealth tactical action games. I do think this is a niche genre, but I think it's an awesome that this type of genre exists. I love that games like this this type of game exists because it's so unique, you know. But beyond that, like, I'm not sure what it does from an industry standpoint.
Yeah, I would say for players like me, this is by far the best introduction I've ever come across
Yeah.
to this type of, tactics game. And so I highly recommend it if you are ever at all remotely interested in this type of game. I would say start with Desperados 3. It was the one that held my attention for the longest. I had a really good time playing it. And you could discover a whole genre's worth of games that you love because of this one game. Um, so I do commend it for that for sure. I do think that this is a bit of, like you said, it's niche. How you really break outside of that. I'm trying to, and this isn't the best comparison because they're completely different games shooting for different audiences. But for example, Hades is a roguelite that was able to appeal to people beyond roguelite fans.
Yeah. Right.
And
Right.
uh, a game like Desperados 3 is getting close to that, I think. I don't think it's quite hit the same level of Hades where it's like, listen, anybody's going to pick up this game and enjoy it. But I think it certainly does a very good job of that. I think, I mean, and of course, this is totally my bias because I'm not a huge fan of these types of games anyway, but still looking for the Hades of, the real time tactics games. one that's really going to rope me in, one that's going to cause a huge buzz. A lot of people are going to talk about it and just be totally in love with it. I don't think this is quite it, but I think we're getting close. And so the developers, I think this is Me Games. This is a German company. I think they're on the right track. I think the next game that they release is certainly it has the potential to be the Hades of the real time tactics, in that it can attract a much wider audience rather than the core demographic that is interested in these games.
I think among the PC gamer crowd, there's definitely a strong audience of tactical strategy fans. I mean, the companies keep making these games. I mean, for goodness sake, Paradox makes these completely obtuse grand strategy games that are literally so intellectually and tactically dense that the
they
fact
did Crusader Kings 3, right?
Yes, yeah.
That's Paradox, yeah.
The fact that anyone even like Crusader Kings 3, I actually was able to crack the code a teeny bit, which I was actually surprised by, but that's partly because they made massive improvements to the UI in the third game. But
right.
I mean, like Hearts of Iron 4 is this like World War II strategy game that is so technically deep. I mean, it's literally like I'd have to get another job. I'd have to get like a master's degree to understand how to play it. This is definitely not in that realm. This is definitely much on the lighter side, and it's on Game Pass, console and PC.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got a niche audience, and I don't think it needs to go out of that. I think it just does what it does really well. It'll continue to innovate, and this has probably been one of the biggest, like most innovative games in this franchise for a while. I think the big like mega hit in this specific niche is Commando.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure there's a new Commando game coming. I don't know if it'll be on Game Pass or whatever, but yeah, no, this is one of those games that I think a lot of people are going to be introduced to, like yourself, Jake. You probably never ever would have picked this up without Game Pass.
Nope.
And so that's the future of games like this. Is the fact that Game Pass exists means you're going to see more stuff, and we've already talked about this like before. You're going to see more games like this like go and succeed and get buzz because people are going to go play them that never played them ever before. That never would have spent their money on it.
For sure. Cameron, I want to reiterate something that you brought up here. We said Hearts of Iron 4, Desperados 3, Crusader Kings 3. These games, these franchises are successful enough to have sequels. So there's definitely a demographic out there. And Cameron, I think you're 100% correct. In the PC crowd, like I'm thinking about the games. I mean, think about the episode we just did on our comfort food games. Both mentioned Age of Empires 2, right?
Yeah.
And games that you and I played, like Red Alert, these were all PC games. And so these types of games have been around for a super long time, and they are successful for sure. But what I want to bring up is something I said earlier. These types of games function so much better on a keyboard than they do on a controller.
That's true.
And so if you're going to play this game, it is on Game Pass, and I did play it on console, and I thought they did a fine job with the controls, but I think you're going to enjoy it much better on PC. And I wanted to bring this up because there is one game that I played recently that is along these lines of sort of real-time strategy. It's much more tower defense style, and it's Bad North. And this is, developed by Plausible Concept and published by Raw Fury. If we are the Game Pass shill podcast, then Jacob is the Raw Fury indie publisher shill. I'm sure all of our listeners know that by now. Anyway, Bad North was a game that was formerly on Game Pass, is no longer on Game Pass, but it's on all platforms. That was, I think, the only other game of this genre recently that I played on console, and I really, really enjoyed. So if we're talking about these two examples, it's gonna happen. Maybe it's Desperados 4. I don't know what it is, but I think they're coming to console, and I think through services like Game Pass, people are going to be able to enjoy them. So I do see room for growth for this type of genre in the console market. But as of right now, these games just function so much better on a PC.
And with that, Jake, that takes us to the close of another episode of the Pre-Order Bonus, talking about Desperados 3. Again, that's available on Game Pass, PC, and Xbox. I don't know if it's on PlayStation. I think it might just be on Xbox and PC, or on Steam. You can go buy it on Steam. I think it's only like $40 on Steam if you want to get the full version. Fantastic game. Give it a shot, especially if you haven't tried the genre out before. You might crack it open and be surprised at how much you enjoy it. Follow us on Twitter at PreorderCast. Follow me at MassGeneric. Follow Jake at Jacob_ChipTip18. Subscribe. Make sure you, if you just downloaded this episode offhand, make sure you subscribe to us. That really helps get the
helps a lot.
New episodes into your podcast service that you use every week. And then you can also find us on YouTube, Mass Generic Gaming on YouTube. You can just type it right on the search box and it'll pop up. You can see all of our video episodes on there, and other videos as we make them, like Jake's Where Are They Now series, where he talks about indie games that are out there in the wild, that are lost, that we don't have much information on, and we speculate on those. So thank you, everybody, for listening. We appreciate all your support, and have a fantastic night.